Thank you. Thank you, Paul and Lillian. Thank you, interpersonal network, international network of interpersonal meaning. Thank you. It makes you think. As Sarah mentioned that I didn't know I was an existential psychologist, but I think I am. Yeah, now I know. But it makes you think. I mean, imagine a Lifetime Achievement Award. That comes at the end of a lifetime, right? Imagine that. When I first realized by email that I was going to receive this wonderful honor, I immediately sat down and began writing a 6-hour acceptance speech. And then I realized, well, 6 hours is probably a bit too long. So when I actually got it written, it was only written for 2 hours. And then I realized that was probably a bit too long. And so I can't exaggerate this, with incredible bone-crunching effort, I got it down to 1 hour. And then I got a wonderful email announcing that I would have a half an hour. And I realized, of course, the justice of that. Nobody wants anything more than a half an hour at this time of day. And so I'm going to tell you everything I know in a half an hour. But I'm going to skim a bit, and there will be a written version of this. I think both Michael's and my presentation will be published, right? With it, yeah. So I want you to read the written version of mine, because I really do have 6 hours of material that I want to tell you, but you're not going to get it all. I want to start by telling you about my second existential crisis. If I had more time, I'd tell you about the first one. The first one was when I was in my 20s, and it was very serious, and it involved near suicide and very, very heavy stuff. But that was long, long ago. And between then and now, life has grown gradually fairly wonderful. I'm still having trouble with the phrase "life is suffering," because mine hasn't been after I got over the hard part. But now I want to tell you about my second existential crisis. And that is, well, I'm 78 years old, and I have cancer, as many people my age do. And I'm not facing imminent death, but death is sitting on my shoulder, whispering in my ear. And in some ways, that's not so bad. I mean, I've had a full life, and I could get into a good long rest. It's not so bad, but the crisis is this. The crisis has to do with despair, or we can say, I think, existential despair. The crisis is, it goes back to something which Erik Erikson wrote, which I can't find the exact quote, but it was something like this. He said, we must die courageously so that those who live after us will live courageously. And I want to die courageously for my grandchildren and for my children. But I've got a problem. This is the problem. You know, it occurred to me when I was writing this that maybe I have just pretended to be worthy of an award in order to be able to tell my existential crisis to a whole room full of therapists who will understand, I know, and may even give me some good free advice. Here it is. My field is a mess. Jeff Thompson made this clear in a talk he gave earlier today. He points out that in the field of addiction, there are 60 journals, 60 journals, where you can publish your stuff. And there are at least 24. He mentioned 24 theories of addiction, and they're incompatible. No one has succeeded in reconciling them. And I would add to what the dismal picture which Jeff presented, he presented it very well, but it's nonetheless a dismal picture. I would add to that those same 24 theories were there 50 years ago when I entered the field, and none of them are new. And the irresolution continues. We are in an intellectual disaster area in my field, which is addiction. I don't know how much this generalizes to other kinds of subfields of clinical psychology, but this is my situation. This is, and I say existential despair, I'm not joking. That's a horrible, horrifying situation. We're going nowhere. In the meantime, all the indications are that this problem of addiction is mounting steadily. Not only are we getting addicted to more and more, visible things like drugs, but all the other addictions, which incidentally are the majority. They're only a minority, a large minority, but only a minority are drug addictions. All the others are getting more and more prominent. We are drowning in addiction by all indications. Now, I can't put a graph up there that will show you, because of course we don't have data on these kinds of things, but I think it's true. And I know certainly I've spent literally 50 years studying it, and I think I can say that with safety. We're losing, and we are in the same state of intellectual despair that we were 50 years ago. This meeting is a bright spot. For me, someone said, I think it was Jeff, that maybe the one person who has provided a big enough umbrella to get all the theories together is Viktor Frankl. Maybe not, but that's possible. And certainly I've heard people talk about my field of addiction, and of course it's many of your fields too. I've heard people talk with great intelligence and feeling. This is the bright spot. But the problem is that we are still in a state of intellectual disaster, and we're still losing the battle. And what do we do about that? I'm not going to answer that directly, but I'm going to comment on it. I want to show you everything that I know, that I think I know about addiction. Here it is, 50 years summarized. This is the modern era. The gentleman in the center is one of the fathers of modernity. Modernity is the last 500 years. This is the way historians talk about it. And the gentleman in the center is one of its authors. Who is that guy? You recognize him? It's not Luther. Could be Luther, but it isn't. It's Columbus. It's Christopher Columbus. Notice he's looking worried. I think he has every right to look worried. What he is launching, let's say Columbus. Of course, there's many other people, but we're putting things in a nutshell here because I've only got a half an hour. What did he launch? Well, he launched a cross-oceanic trade which essentially obliterated bunches of North American societies, not just him single-handedly, of course, but with the conquistadors and all the other settlers who followed him to the New World, and other settlers and colonists and adventurers who went to Asia and obliterated societies. The New World, the modern age starts with fragmentation of societies. And this is really the continuing story of modernity. And here I can cite all kinds of people. I'm a compulsive documenter. I can give you every reference you want. There's a sense of historians that the essence of the new age, of the modern age, begins with the voyages of exploration, and it begins with international commerce, crushing of existing cultures in order to make the international commerce possible. And it's not just the crushing of the cultures in the New World or in Asia, but it's the crushing of the cultures in Europe to make these voyages of exploration possible. Again, I'd be very brief. Read the long version. But I mean, think about it for a minute. Those of you who are Canadian, think about the Hudson Bay blanket as a weapon of mass destruction. Oh, some of you know this. Yeah, it's a weapon of mass destruction in the sense that the Hudson Bay blanket comes over here and it completely disrupts the local commerce of native peoples, and their hunters become traders, and they work for the white guy at the bay, rather than for all the traditional obligations they have in their society and so forth. The culture breaks down because the blanket is so much better for keeping warm than a beaver skin. Then naturally they give big stacks of beaver skins to get a few blankets, and everything is wrecked. But think about the other end of it. What's happening in Europe is that people have to be cleared off the land all over Northern Europe in order to make enough wool to make all those blankets. So we have the clearance of the commons and the clearance of the highlands, which enables sheep farming. You get the picture, right? The modern age is wonderful. Like it's not monstrous. It's not a disaster. It's just like any other age, any other epoch, or any other era. It starts out with full of promise and wonder, and it gets somewhere. I mean, it gives us wonderful things that we all cherish, and all these electronic things we wave around. Modernity is wonderful, but it comes at this cost, that it fragments existing societies, and by fragmenting existing societies, it dislocates individuals. And this dislocation, well, we have lots of words which are almost synonyms of dislocation. For example, existential vacuum comes to mind, or alienation comes to mind, or poverty of the spirit comes to mind. We can jump from tradition to tradition, and what we're seeing here is that historians of the modern age recognize that it involves crushing existing societies, it involves dislocation of individuals. And when you've got a bunch of individuals who are dislocated, well, what do you get? You get depression, you get anxiety, you get apathy, you get family violence, and of course you get addiction. Why do you get addiction? Well, because addiction serves. Addiction is a way of handling. Addiction gives meaning to a life which is bereft of meaning. I'm using my language when I talk about this, but I think you can see it can all be translated directly into Viktor Frankl's language. So, okay, so we get a flood of addictions because people are finding ways to fill the existential vacuum. That's how Viktor Frankl puts it. But other people put it in other ways, and we get these bunch of addictions, and the consequence of addiction is a way of adapting, you see, a way of finding meaning. It's a kind of meaning making, and The consequence of that meaning making is that, well, some people stay alive who would otherwise commit suicide or run amok and be destroyed by other people. It works. And some people get out of their addictions and they get right out of this circle. I haven't drawn this arrow, but some people get right, they naturally recover from their addictions. They're over them, they're out of that. Other people feed back across Columbus there and increase their own dislocation, and other people through their addictions increase the fragmentation of society. I mean, think about the money and power addictions of Canadian guys running Canadian mining companies who are laying waste to large areas in South America and Africa now. This is a picture of modernity. This is a picture of modern age. It's not a very happy picture. It's not just my picture. I mean, I wouldn't make it up. This is a composite of an awful lot of historical work, and it's not condemning modernity. It's just saying, look, modernity has dangerous side effects, and one of them is this dislocation addiction link, which is giving us this tidal wave of addiction. And what do? We got this tidal wave of addiction. Well, what we do is we try to control it, and that's what we do, right? We treat people, and to go back to my title here, we create healing communities in a toxic society. And we also do harm reduction, and we also change drug laws so that they're not as punitive as they used to be. We do all kinds of things, but they're not working. And there's the despair. We're doing all this, and we're doing all this research. Like this is my research, right? But let's say I spent 50 years working that out, which I did. Thousands of other people spent 50 years in that same period. Collectively, they put enormous amounts of, countless. Nobody can count the amount of effort which has been put into this problem intellectually or in terms of treatment. Look, we've got a whole room full of people here who are involved in treatment. Well, there's thousands of these rooms. I know because I go around speaking to rooms full of people who are doing treatment. And we're not solving it. There's the despair. So what do we do about that? Well, as you know, what we do is we do our intellectual homework and we do our treatment work, and it doesn't get us anywhere. What should we do? Of course we should do what we're already doing, but what should we do instead? Well, I think Viktor Frankl said it. Here's what he said. Meaning is possible even in spite of suffering, provided certainly that the suffering is unavoidable. I want to show you this. If it were to be avoidable, the meaningful thing to do would be to remove its cause, be it psychological, biological, or political. To suffer unnecessarily is masochistic rather than heroic. Think about that. Here's Viktor Frankl, and he's saying, we can, as you know, he's saying that all kinds of good can come out of suffering. We can transcend suffering. We can make meaning out of suffering, but the meaningful thing to do, if it is unavoidable, would be to remove its cause, be it psychological, biological, or political. To suffer unnecessarily is masochistic rather than heroic. I think we're suffering unnecessarily. I think that we are going to change the vicious cycle which I drew there. I think we're going to change it. We're going to have to. And I think that the people who are going to be active in it are us, other people as well, but it has to include us. Usually at this point, someone, if I'm saying this in a class, let's say in a university, someone raises their hand and says, well, what can I do? And I say, I'm assuming someone is asking that question, well, you know, you can live a good life, you can take care of yourself, you can take care of your family, and really you can't do much more than that. But there's a different question you can ask, and that is, what can we do? And that's where again, this is my despair. I think that we, in this case, we who are, let's say, psychologists, we have not acted boldly enough in dealing with these problems. We have acted on the level of people who bring comfort to individuals, and we do that well. And you know, I've met wonderful therapists in the last few days, and I know how hard they try, and I'm one too, by the way. I'm still doing it myself. I mean, I'm a grandpa therapist, but I'm still doing it. Yeah, therapy is wonderful, but really, the implication of what I think I know about addiction and all the related problems is that we have to act in such a way that society changes. Well, what would that look like? What I think it would look like is professional societies, let's say the Canadian Psychological Association, would talk much more realistically about what is possible. I mean, we know the treatment works, and we know it's a very good thing that we get money to do treatment. But I think we know, I believe that we know this, that our treatment will never bring the problem under control. It can't, because the problem is structurally built into the modern age itself. And therefore, we have to be in a position to say that what's called for here is political change, if I can use that scary word which Viktor Frankl used. We have to be in the position to talk about how a society is going to be revised to bring these problems under control. Now, the third point of my despair is that when I start talking like this, it doesn't go over nearly as well as the earlier part of my talk, and that people keep making very, very elegant arguments about why that isn't true. And I want to choose an example. I want to pick on somebody. I think I have only about 5 minutes left. Do I? 6 minutes. I want to pick on Jordan Peterson. Because Jordan Peterson is he's probably the most influential psychologist in the world right now, or certainly in North America, and he's had major influence on this organization, and he's a wonderful scholar. Like I think we need Jordan Peterson because he's opening up questions which really need to be organized, need to be opened up. Now I'm going to attack him. In his book, 12 Rules for Living, one of the points which he makes repeatedly is stated explicitly in rule number 6. And that is, I'm going to read it to you. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Now, it isn't only Jordan Peterson, and I don't mean to be mean to him, because I have a lot of respect for him. But what Jordan Peterson is saying in his book, and in particular in that rule, is that really our business as psychologists and our business as people is to just get our life right, to get our life in order. He says, get your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Who's he talking to? Well, he's in chapter 6, where he brings up this point. He starts by talking to people who go to school and shoot the students, the serial killers, or mass murderers, I guess. And he says, you know, look, you guys, don't go berserk. Get your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Well, that makes total sense in terms of mass murderers, but it doesn't make sense, I think, in terms of serious, professional, responsible people. And my despair is that I think that we who are serious, professional people have not taken our responsibilities well enough, that we have acted collectively to actually use the information that we have. I feel bold in saying this. In fact, I debated about whether I was going to say it, but I was inspired by some other speakers at the meeting, and particularly MC10, who has said some very similar things. I think we're not going far enough. Or again, to quote MC10, we should be more scared. I think we have not fully faced the problems that we must face. Thank you very much.